Hey guys, thanks for joining us. We're going to be recapping the week 4 discussion, which was hunkering down or bugging out. So one of the first things you have to consider when you're in your planning stages of disaster preparedness is deciding whether you want to stay or leave or maybe prepare for both. In some situations, it might be better to try and hunker down or stay at home or in a safe place. And as long as you have the supplies needed and a fortified location, this option might work well. But if there's a mandatory evacuation or if the situation becomes highly dangerous, you might also have to leave, or what many preppers call bug out. One important thing I wanted to make sure that I did put in this lesson was, when you're prepping, stay on budget. Our family, like many families out there, we're just a low income average family. So we can only do a little bit at a time. I always say we can only do what we can do. Don't sink your family in debt just to try to prep. I know some preppers, they're very gung-ho and they want to buy, tons of supplies. And that's great if you have the money to do that. But typically, we don't have the money for that. So it's not worth compromising your family's finances, but more importantly, your family's relationships, just to go out and spend tons of money you don't have in the first place. Make sure you shop around and compare and find the best deals and do the math. If you find one of those buckets of food that says 200 servings for only such and such amount, make sure you're doing the math and breaking that down per person in your group. To make sure that is a good deal, because just because it says it is, until you break it down and do the math, you're not going to realize. We personally, thought we found a great deal, and then when we got to breaking it down, not so much. So, don't overspend for brand names. Look for the quality and durability of a product, not just that brand name. So let's move on to hunkering down. Okay. So if you choose to wait out a disaster, make sure you have the needed items it's going to take for you guys to get by. Personally, I recommend stockpiling at least 30 days of supplies per person. So you're going to need all the stuff we talked about last week. You're going to need the fire, water, food, shelter, signaling, security, first aid. Everything that was in lesson 3, you're going to need this. A couple notes I did make in here was, especially for food, remember that you need nutritional sources of food. Sure, you can have 30 cans of Beanie Weenies or whatever, but you're going to need some variety, and you're going to need some good nutritional food sources. So, make sure you have, to the best of your ability, a variety of foods. Also remember, if you have a little one, especially an infant or toddler that's on formula, you think ahead and plan ahead and have plenty of formula or, maybe baby food or whatever. In more long-term situations, you can actually make your own. But just in the immediate situation, make sure you have some formula and everything you need. Also, if you have a pet, make sure you have pet supplies ready to go and stockpiled as well. One thing on the shelter is make sure where you're staying is fortified, and we'll talk about that next week a little more. But remember, you have supplies. Others won't. And some of them, they're not going to hesitate to try to come get yours. So try to do what you can to fortify wherever you're staying if it's not already, and kind of keep a low profile. Security, I did mention that have a defense system of some kind in place. If you have a weapon, make sure you got ammo. If you choose not to use weapons, many people don't like weapons, that's fine, but you're going to need to have some alternative method for defense at least. Make sure that everyone knows how to safely handle and use all weapons. Last thing you want is to put a gun in someone's hands that does not know how to properly use them and secure them. You're not Rambo. Be realistic and use common sense with weapons always. On the medicine and first aid, make sure you have the basic medicines that you might need and a good first aid kit. If you have a family member that requires a daily medicine, do your best to try to store it up, at least a 30-day supply if you can. For instance, some of these are like insulin, asthma medicines, heart medicines, blood pressure medicine, pain medicines if you have a chronic condition. I know my stepdaughter has hypothermia, has hypothyroidism, so she has medication she has to take daily. So, in a disaster situation, we know that we're going to need to have that medicine stockpiled. She has to have it. She also actually has asthma. She used to take medicine daily for that. She doesn't anymore, but she does need a rescue inhaler at times. So, we have to have that rescue inhaler or a couple of those also, in our supplies. I did also incorporate fuel here. Remember, situations can change instantly, and though you might hate to, you might be forced to leave if you're in your location that you feel is safe. Make sure you have enough fuel. I would suggest at least a full tank of gas or fuel for your vehicle, or at least enough to get you at least 100 miles away, I would say. Fuel can be stored and its shelf life can be extended by using a fuel stabilizer. If you Google a fuel stabilizer, you'll see what I mean. And I believe it extends your fuel 6 to 9 months, the shelf life of it. So that's a good option. Okay, let's talk about bugging out real quick. This is where some of your preparedness really gets tested because it's time to finally break out those bug out bags. If you already have a bug out location, it's highly recommended that you stock up this location beforehand. That's the point of the bug out location. Make sure it's, stuff hits the fan and you gotta go. That's your location. Make sure that it has what you need. Because you could be caught out leaving with nothing, depending on the situation. So I did recommend that everyone take a bug out bag, or also called a 72-hour bag. I think everyone needs one. My husband actually said that he believes that each adult just needs one. But if your kids are old enough and they can carry one, I would make them one too. For little bitty ones, obviously you're not going to necessarily have them carry one, but common sense. Don't forget about the weather. Dress accordingly, and always make sure you're taking along proper footwear like sneakers or hiking boots, depending on the season and where you're going. The weather's going to play a huge factor. Take a map and have alternative routes planned. We talked about that last week. If something happens and you're leaving on foot, I highly suggest, if you're going through a crowd, you tether your children to you. Last thing you want is something to happen, the craps hit the fan, and you and your 4 little ones are trying to get through the crowded streets, and you lose one. That's unimaginable. I don't know. I can't even go there. It's just terrible to me. That would be like the worst. Okay, so stay calm and try not to panic. Especially if you have kids, because if you're panicking, what are they going to do? They're going to panic as well. So do your best to stay calm. In extreme situations, if you don't have a bug out location, you may need to learn to live off the land. Basically kind of go in hiding. And so you need to kind of be aware of what edible plants are out there in edible vegetation. So if you maybe get a book and read up on that way you're aware of it. You're also going to need to know how to snare game and do some food scavenging. And there are many resources out there that can help you on all of this stuff, but we'll also look into that obviously a little bit more later. So I hope you found my rambling kind of useful. And sorry to take up so much of your time, but I hope you'll visit us in the week 5. I think we're on week 5 now. Discussion. And we appreciate you listening to this one. Thanks.